I can't think of anything that we need more in our culture right now than to be acknowledging rites of passage for teenagers. Just to know that you've got a community that recognises you, that sees you for the truth of who you are, and that you see those people down the street, you see them in the cafe. I can't think of anything else really that I want to give all my time and energy to.
Hello and welcome to What is a Rite of Passage. My guest today, Moggie, is a practitioner of ceremony and community. Moggie heads up the Castlemaine Rites of Passage Teenage Girls event. I'm excited to welcome her here today to share her perspective on the question and hopefully provide some context around the process for our young women. We acknowledge the Jara people, the traditional custodians of the land where this is being recorded. We acknowledge elders, past, present and future, and may their ceremonies and initiations be remembered, and may this feed and heal the country on which we live, work and play. Welcome, Moggie.
Yeah, thanks, Damo. Good to be here. Or I have to say, I always feel a bit nervous in this kind of context of being interviewed.
Mm.
Yeah, because I feel I'm a person that kind of works impromptu, out of the moment. Sometimes the notion of this is, somewhat out of the context of everyday life.
Mm.
But I'm here anyway.
Your everyday life is possibly not the same as everybody else's everyday life.
Yeah, indeed.
Would you like to check in? Where are you coming from? What are you bringing?
Yeah, where am I coming from? Well, I'm in Jara country here, and I live, just out of Guildford, and live on a bit of land. Yeah, quite a bit of land that backs onto forest, and I feel really grateful, as you said, that my everyday perhaps is communing with the birds and the kangaroos and the echidnas and the various creatures and trees that live here. So they're the ones that bring me a lot of delight every day. But I'm also arriving here today. In a week's time, we're going to be starting a rites of passage for a group of mothers and daughters and sisters. So, as is the case with things like that, there's a lot of last minute detail, and so I feel like I've been making phone calls and texting and leaving messages and trying to cater to all the unique circumstances of all the people that are arriving with us next week. And it's consuming business, making sure that communication is consistent and flowing, and that everybody who needs to know what they need to know are informed, and feels so I was really grateful actually to kind of bring a conclusion to that today, and just then be able to spend some time outside and tend my chooks, and so I'm grateful for the way that nature really allows me to presence myself and recalibrate my nervous system really.
Mm.
That's me coming here today.
Usually my first question, Mog, which we've kind of skirted around already, is it's around self-regulation. And so it's how do you come home to yourself? Or as you said before, we press record, how do you shake the road dust off? How do you regulate?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a lot of things that I do actually, which is probably, stems overall from a kind of place of just commitment to self actually, because I kind of feel like we're not really much help or service to this life if we're not really tending self. And, it feels like that's a long road to kind of learn that lesson, but I now, really understand the value of it. So, I think there's kind of layers to that. I have various things that I do on a weekly or fortnightly basis that just tends to self and tends to my body, because I guess I feel like life processes through my body, and if I'm not giving myself time and space to let that move through my kind of physical being, then it builds up and just leads to being in a kind of uncomfortable body. So I just have a commitment to a few different body practices. One of them is Feldenkrais, which I just think is the most incredible practice, but it's kind of focused on awareness, and I guess that's what I really like about it, is that the gift of it is just drawing you really deeply into the present and being really aware. And I guess that's overall a kind of commitment that I have in life, is just to live with a lot of awareness for myself, but also awareness of all that's kind of moving around me, because I feel that yeah, there's a lot for us to listen to in this life if we're paying attention. So in a way, that way of living is regulating. But yeah, I think my favourite really is kind of like if there's any moment where there's a lot going on or whatever, is just listening to bird song. And I just think birds are so brilliant at bringing us back to the moment and bringing us back to joy and lifting up our hearts and minds, you know. And we're so lucky here in Australia that it's really easy to just kind of turn your awareness there and woo, you know, there they are singing a song for you. So yeah, and I'm so grateful that I live in a place where I get to hear a lot of that. But I also love that it's the kind of thing that actually you can find in most places that you go, even if that's the city. Yeah, so I do that if I have to kind of visit any big cities. I keep the same practice, like let the sound of the birds be a lot more dominant in my awareness than the sound of traffic or industrial noise. So yeah, they're probably some of the things. I love just being in my garden and tending my goats, and anything that kind of tends to life tends to be regulating for me as well.
Thank you. And Mog, I have some appreciation for you. Be like 10 years ago or something that I met you, and it was the first time I met you, and we were at a ceremony for a mutual friend's passing. It was a multiple day ceremony in Cam's backyard. And the thing I remember about that occasion is you taught me some language that I could use with my dog, who I had just met, and it was very, very useful. It was very useful. So that I appreciate. Something else I really appreciate is the fact that we ventured into a build a client relationship in the last couple of years, and I really want to acknowledge that through that whole process, I found you extremely committed and gracious. And I guess I want to appreciate both of us for being able to maintain somewhat of a ceremonial relationship through something like that, through a building contract. And I'd say it's impossible, but it's valued.
Yeah, and you may be happy to know that yeah, the barn is finding some special uses. Yeah, it's being
Beautiful.
appreciated for its beauty.
That's amazing. So, Mog, would you share your experience? I'd say with rites of passage, but because you're so specifically involved in a specific rite of passage with the women, I'll invite you to share your experience with the question of what is a rite of passage, or how did you come across it? What does it mean to you?
Mm.
And then feel free to go into everything else.
Yeah, well, that feels like a pretty enormous question in itself. It feels like there's a lot that can be shared in there. Yeah, and I guess probably I wouldn't just start in the place of really kind of getting some clarity about what rites of passage is. Because I guess, in essence, I feel like we have many rites of passage in our life. And, you know, it starts with birth. You know, that is one rite of passage. And yeah, there are many through our lives. And I guess, particularly for women, we have some quite significant rites of passage just through nature of our biology. So there's kind of menarche, you know, when we start to bleed. I've just been reflecting a little bit on that, you know, with the teens kind of coming through. And that's quite a powerful kind of moment for a woman. And there's also childbirth, and that is definitely a rite of passage, a profound rite of passage, yeah, in the sense of, I guess, to me, you know, when I think of rites of passage, I think about traversing the unknown. And so, yeah, and then of course, then we have menopause, which is another kind of profound rite of passage for women. And it's, you know, a real delight that these days, like, there just seems to be a whole lot more talk about something that, you know, really wasn't spoken about. And yeah, I guess for me, sort of personally, like, I haven't necessarily read about this, but this is how I feel in my own journey is, in a way, I feel like each of those things are kind of incremental steps of power for a woman. And when I say that, you know, it's really that for me, that's the notion of coming into the fullness of who you are. And I think those three significant sort of thresholds really, yeah, like really bring a woman into her fullness. And I guess, you know, behind that, I've engaged with a lot of, training, I guess, or study, or mentoring probably is the better word, but certainly with the Indigenous woman here in Australia, Rotary woman, and also kind of in a Native American lineage, the Waptika lineage. And, you know, there's a lot of teachings about that, about women essentially really come into the fullness of their medicine is another expression, I guess. But once they've gone through menopause, and you can definitely kind of see that that kind of pathway. So I think there's many profound rites of passage actually in life, and ultimately, it ends in death, and it also is a rite of passage, and an incredible unknown. Like none of us can really know that. And so for me, and I mention all of those because I think at its core with rites of passage, this is one of the things that we're teaching, is teaching people or supporting people to traverse the unknown, because we live in a culture that's kind of full of known. Everything's laid out, you can Google anything, but how do we actually walk in the unknown? And in reality, life is incredibly unknown. We can think that we know what's going on, or plan it a particular way, or have all the material and the research, but really, like, it's unknown, and it always throws things at us that challenge us, in that place. I guess, yeah, at its core, my interest is in all of that. And I love working with people in that space. And so, yeah, I guess to just bring some kind of clarity too to, I work with the women's rites of passage here in Castlemaine, and I work with the men's rites of passage, as you know, like supporting women from the outside, because as you know, like there's a really significant role in what happens for fathers and sons and the mothers in that place. So we do a lot to kind of support and tend the mothers. Yeah, bring a fullness to what rites of passage is. But yeah, so we run a teens and mothers rites of passage, and we also started last year a kind of adult women's rites of passage. Yeah, so I guess, and I bring that up in the sense that, I see there's kind of two things in here. Like, so rite of passage to me is part of how we navigate the unknown, but it's also how we kind of get seen and recognised in a community, like in the culture of community. And the thing that's really interesting since we've kind of started doing our adult women's rites of passage is like we just instantly have this massive waiting list. Like we've got over 5 years worth of events to run. And so it's kind of like, wow, there's a need, isn't there? And, so, in reality, I'd just kind of be guessing really. But I assume the need is kind of to be seen, to be recognised, and to really find yourself, And I guess my understanding in the context of rites of passage as well, yeah, the various ceremonies, I guess, that traditionally would have happened, and yeah, perhaps a return to our culture, in small ways, but trying to reclaim this being of this really getting to know yourself, like really understanding who you are. And to me, what's critical to that is actually being witnessed in the presence of others. And that's how we really come to know ourselves, because there's a lot about ourselves that we don't really know or understand. In fact, I was having a conversation last night with Rosie. I also do the rites of passage with, and just talking about how, I guess as we've travelled along in our rites of passage, there's different moments where I've stepped up and just spoken to the group or whatever. That's so not my comfort place, to speak in front of groups. Just like, this is probably not my comfort place to kind of like share in an interview, but, whatever, I'll do it. But somewhere in there, like it proved to be valuable. And so to me, it's kind of like, okay, cool. Well, I'll do that because it's appreciated and people find value in it. So whatever it is that's kind of stopping me from doing that, I just need to find the courage to do that. I wouldn't really know that about myself if it wasn't for others, because if it was just me, I wouldn't really want to do that, because I don't really necessarily think that I'm good at public speaking, although I think I've probably got better at it, but in general, that kind of stuff. I didn't think I had anything valuable to say. All these things of, yeah, it's really kind of, what's the word, but, putting ourselves down, I guess, which is a very common trait in women. So Yeah, I think there's a need to be recognised. There's a need to be witnessed, so we understand ourselves. Yeah, there's a need to kind of step towards finding a place in our community, and I think it's really hard for us to imagine that on our own. I think we need community to do that. So yeah, I guess there's some of the bits. I can't even remember what the question was now.
Beautiful.
Yeah, something of some of my thoughts of what a rite of passage is.
Mm, yeah, for me, there's a bit of acknowledgement in there too. Like so much of what you're saying now, sort of, I feel is reflected in my journey of getting to know myself. There'd be something about empowerment, authority in there for me as well. But, from what I've seen, you've really approached this from a kind of real pioneering journey. I suppose you were a part of the community group in the men's rite of passage, but then you kind of just launched into, so we're going to build a rite of passage for young women. And whereas I kind of got to hide in the shadows of all of these amazing mentors for years and years before I kind of started leading in any way.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a kind of pioneering thing, and and it's been a really beautiful journey, and there's been a lot to learn, and I guess probably like I am the kind of person that does have this kind of commitment to, yeah, like I think this thing is needed, like how on earth do we work it out, kind of thing, and it was a really long journey to kind of work it out, and there were lots of kind of things to navigate, and there's people that have kind of come and gone along the journey. And, one of the huge pieces, I guess, in bringing women together is actually, I think it's bringing people together. But this wound definitely shows up when women come together is, women trusting other women. And so it felt like a really long journey of just, and being included. Like that is another big thing for women. So I think we spent about 2 years just holding inclusive meetings, and eventually like it got to the point where, okay, like, well, if we're actually going to do something, and there was just like masses of kind of discussion in that time, and yeah, and actually it led to a beautiful kind of shared experience with our local mob here, like, and coming together of, yeah, local Indigenous women and, other women of the community and having a shared kind of a rite of passage sort of experience. It was a bit more of a community kind of event kind of thing. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but nonetheless, it was pretty profound what we shared, but it also brought up a lot. And so it just happened that once. But yeah, we've been on a long journey of, consulting with community and getting lots of input and, then eventually just having to have a few people where we just kind of knuckled down and, yeah, try to, did a lot of experiential training, I guess, towards trying to craft something. And I guess, because at its heart, to me, like the thing that's really important that we cultivate in a rite of passage is connection. Because connection allows us to connect to ourselves. It allows us to connect to others. And, the wonderful tool for facilitating that is connecting to nature. So it's very much a nature based process that allows those other things to kind of transpire. But I definitely kind of, yeah, there's definitely the experience of, yeah, we've had to kind of do a lot to kind of create that kind of community of women willing to kind of sit in that space of rites of passage, and cultivate that connection. And when I say that, like, I guess I'm sort of referring to something that's quite deep, and it's that, it's not like, oh yeah, we're just getting together and we did something together that was fun, or it's kind of like it's when you have those experiences together and they resonate in your heart and actually you can't find any words to describe them. And to me, that's what true connection really is. And so, well, and not, I guess that's what I've been mentored in, and I feel really grateful that I've had some really great mentors that have taken me on a, deep journey in the last 12 years that really support, I guess, the commitment that I have to rites of passage. But they support me in learning and understanding what deep connection actually is, because without actually having experienced it, and it's difficult to facilitate it. Do you know what I mean? You actually have to have deep experiences of connection to be able to facilitate it. And so, in that sense, I am eternally grateful to, yeah, two of my mentors that have really, yeah, facilitated that in a deep way that gives me a deeper understanding and and therefore gives me something to strive for, like when I'm facilitating, like to aim a bit higher. But yeah, so, I feel like at its core, when we run Rite of Passage, that some of the biggest things that we're cultivating are trust, just trust and connection. And in some ways, I feel like, and whatever, we go on a journey and there's challenge in that. But at its core, like that's what we're building is kind of like, hey, it's okay for you to be you in this world. We accept you just like you are. And, like if nothing else, that feels critical to kind of what we do. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything more you want to share about creating ceremony where it doesn't exist in the culture?
Yeah. Um, hmm. um, I want to share a little piece that's just nagging at me that I forgot to mention before when I was talking about kind of like those different stages of power of women. So, one of the things that I really observe that we've kind of discovered and is profoundly different in the women's rites of passage from the men's rites of passage is when it comes to the crunch, like teenage girls are the ones with the power, basically, in that situation because they won't come if they're not willing. Yeah. And equally, if they're really committed to go, like sometimes they're bringing along their mothers who are reluctant. And that, yeah, we've seen that kind of pattern consistently. And so, yeah, what I was reflecting on today was actually just like, yeah, how do we guide those young women to understand, like, and begin to learn to navigate what that is? Because I see it and I see them kind of wielding this power, so to speak, this kind of feminine power, but they don't really know what it is and they don't really know what to do with it. And so, it comes out in these ways of, yeah, I guess, yeah, wanting to kind of take control, kind of like of their lives or to rebel, but really at its core, I think they just want to find that way to really be themselves. Yeah. But we don't really have the culture that kind of allows that to be well recognised, I guess is what it feels to me. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that little piece. And then you have to remind me what the question was. It's about.
Yeah, building ceremony in a culture where it doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, I guess perhaps what would I say? So a lot of the training and background I have comes from a couple of different mentors that I've had. One being John Young, and he is based in America. And what I really value about what he does is he's an anthropologist and he spent a lot of time studying different indigenous cultures and what were the fundamentals that brought about connection in that culture, what maintained it as a connective culture. And then it's kind of like he's translated that into something that we can understand in the West, um, to build that connection again, that connective culture. So he's kind of created a lot of tools that are just so profound and so simple and really useful. I guess that definitely kind of for me forms a foundation of the way that I work in that space. And as I said before, like, having gone and experienced some events that he helps facilitate that have given me just profoundly deep connection experiences that mean I've got a point of reference about what it is that I'm trying to do. So that's been really helpful. I have another mentor, Sal Gincarelli, and he has essentially I have been studying with him for 12 years about ceremony. Yeah, that has given me a lot of foundations for understanding what ceremony is, how it works, how to create a ceremonial container. Yeah. And I guess fundamental to that for me, and I guess, and this is what's also, I guess, I've been cultivating through this mentoring, is really the capacity to listen and to follow spiritual guidance and to know your own connection to spirit. And that's been a long journey, understanding like how that works for me and how it presents itself. But I guess what I experience is that, as I said before, like if you're living in awareness and you're listening, then really you just get guided. So I don't feel like I'm creating anything. I feel like I'm listening and I'm doing what I'm guided to do. And really, I would say that is how our rites of passage ceremonies have emerged. Yeah, in a big way. And then, here we are, we have this kind of, foundational kind of structure. And then, as you would know, even when you're in the event, like you're just listening. What's happening here? Like you're paying attention. What's moving? What's needed? Like, and so always there's a need to be really flexible to just kind of go, which means you sort of have to have a bit of a toolkit under your belt. Yeah, so I just think listening is a very powerful tool. I guess, yeah, the other thing that I want to mention and, perhaps should have mentioned earlier, yeah, over our time we've had a really strong connection with the Tides program in New Zealand. So New Zealand have a Tides and Tracks Rites of Passage, and it runs, or it has run, or it started, I guess, in a similar kind of model to what we have. So I guess here in Castlemaine, the model that we work on, which is pretty unique and presents its own challenges, is that it's a community-based rites of passage. So the people who facilitate are all volunteers out of the community. Like everybody is just volunteering. We're doing it out of the goodness of our heart because we believe in it. And it's extraordinary how many people are engaged in that and really committed, which just shows the need and the value and, how it's supporting us in our lives. But yeah, that we definitely along the way, like had a lot of conversations with them. Yeah, this is kind of a fair while ago now. And then, yeah, they came and actually did I guess you'd call it a kind of a training weekend. It was a sort of, and that was, yeah, I think a really necessary kind of step in our journey because it sort of brought in kind of some external kind of like parties, I guess, that helped, as you would know in the men's rites of passage, when you've got a big group of people all working towards a particular goal and they all come from really different backgrounds and they've all got different ideas and they've all got different wounds and they've all got different egos and they've all got different gifts. Like it's a really complex kind of mishmash of just like a collective that somehow, we're trying to channel into something that is valuable to the teams in our community. And ultimately, I guess you know, for me, it's an investment in the future because I want life to thrive in the future. And if our teens aren't thriving, then life's not thriving. And the current culture for teens doesn't look like thriving to me. So I guess that's my commitment.
Thanks, Mog. I'm just reflecting on the Tides women coming over from New Zealand. You said that they gave you something that was important. When they left, what did you have that you didn't have before?
I guess they gave us some valuable tools. They gave us a lot of varied experiences that definitely supported and contributed somewhat to what we do now. Yeah, and they brought a kind of clarity and strength in their clarity that was really valuable. Yeah, and I think ultimately helped us towards getting more clarity and strength in what we were doing. Yeah, and the other thing that they brought that for me was like so extraordinary. The process of them coming over was an extraordinary experience of reciprocity. So they actually came over here and gave us the training for free. And the men's rites of passage very generously paid for those airfares for the women to come over. And so we were very much in a kind of like receiving place, which, also is something that, women don't do so readily. Like we're great at giving and looking after everybody, but we don't always receive. It's kind of hard to articulate other than actually to have the experience. But we hear this idea about reciprocity. But what I witnessed was that in that place of kind of exchange, and, to be fair, like we also gave them we had a lot of conversations about what the women do to support the men's rites of passage, which is something that they didn't do. So they were kind of getting some learning out of the experience as well. But what I saw was it just creates this really rich territory because when there's kind of this exchange with money, it's kind of like, well, you're buying something, well, what am I going to get? Like, whereas we were just so humbled that they would do that, and we were so humbled that the men would support that it just created this beautiful, soft, fertile place. And yeah, I think that we learnt a lot from that experience as well, about reciprocity and the nature of really giving and receiving. And I think it, yeah, made for fertile ground for us.
Like a gift. It sounds like a foundation. It doesn't sound like tools and skills. It sounds like a foundation, something that was mutually created that now exists in the organisation for beautiful trees and fruit to be grown from.
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
Mm,
And the tree has been growing.
beautiful. When I started this project, this podcast, I thought I was going to run into a whole heap of taboo and clash between secret and sacred, and you can't say that. And I've pretty much encountered nothing that can't be spoken between two practitioners in rites of passage. So with that trust, I am really keen to learn a little bit more about the teenage women's rites of passage. Like, I watched my daughter come and go, really tried to get her out and get her involved, and that ship sailed. So I was, I was with a bit of sadness with that one. And I found that with my experience with teenage boys, there's a couple of real key zingers for me, and they're so simple. It's the value of seeing and hearing a teenage boy, as if what he says and what he does has value. And it is the holding of the fathers as they scramble to find some way to create the space for that boy to step into. And you spoke to the process of creating trust in a group of women. Are there any other real important factors in your process that you feel to share?
I mean, I think what you speak to is a kind of fundamental human need to be seen. And I think that many people are striving for that, really, and, to be seen in the fullness of who we are. And I think that the culture that we live in kind of strips us of that language to appreciate each other, because we tend to gain a lot of identity out of, whatever. I'm a this person, I'm a that person, I do this, I do that, this is my profession. But actually at its core, the things that we really, like when we really think about what we appreciate about people, it's usually qualities. And so I feel that one of the things that we're able to do in that space, and as we grow trust, is coming to appreciate the qualities that different people carry. And yeah, I guess, that's one of the things in some ways that we try to nurture through our rites of passage. And we do have some things in place to kind of cultivate that appreciation of qualities. And I think that then brings us a whole different language to how we actually appreciate each other, or how we get seen. Because I think ultimately that's the part that we want to be seen. Like, we want our hearts to be seen. Really, it's not about like, oh, do I have a whole lot of knowledge about X, Y, and Z? It's kind of like, but can you see my heart? Do you know what I care about? Do you know what makes me, do you know what makes me cry? Like, because I care about it so much. Like, yeah, and I guess, I mean, part of the journey, which is just sort of really speaking more to the same thing, but it's like, how do we let the guards down on that? Because we tend to in our culture, because our hearts are tender, and so we feel vulnerable, to criticism or rejection or not being appreciated. And so it's like, to me, the greatest thing we do is just to create that place, and I would say for people to be brave. I know that a lot of people talk about things being safe, but actually I think it's better that we're brave, because we can't guarantee that anything is safe, really. And I think it's an illusion to think that I'm the one that can make you safe. Actually, you're the one that can make you safe. And when we talk about how we'll, like that we try to create this culture of trust, like the core of trust is trusting self, like you need to trust yourself, like rather than someone else even, trust that feels right for you to share that, or right for you to do that or not do that. Like that's really, part of that getting to know self is like trusting self. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I just know at the end of it, there's just this beautiful thing where we're just unified as a group of women. And I think, one of my kind of favourite memories really in the first really big program that we ran. And as you would know, at the moment, there's a lot in the space around gender and gender identity and pronouns. And so we spent a lot of time, like, prior to diving into this, kind of trying to explore that and getting people to speak to us about it and try to understand how to navigate that and how we should be and not be. And, it was all pretty confusing. But the thing that I loved was that at the end of our first big rites of passage, the teens who kind of came in, with some of that, like, I don't want to be identified as anything in particular. Like, part of their feedback was just like, this is so awesome to be in this group of women, and they were choosing to use that word. And I was just like, yes, you know, and in that, like, there's no one way to be a woman. I mean, there's so many ways. But we have a particular biology, and that biology is a profound gift to us and is the thing that brings that distinction between men and women. And that's not to say there's lots of nuance to what can happen in that space. But to be attuned to the biology and the gifts that come with that, feels important to me, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah, I loved that moment where, of their own volition, there were teens just celebrating being part of a group of women, which to me was just that real expression of unity. And yeah, that makes my heart sing.
Mm. Yeah, I'm wondering, I imagine that you're well and truly in the descent into this next event. What are you listening to from that space?
Yeah, there's kind of many layers, I guess, that I'm listening to. I'm definitely listening to nature, and so I'm paying a lot of attention to that, to the signs that come from nature. And we've already had some pretty strong kind of synchronicities happen that, just tell me we're on track. I'm also listening to the group. So this particular rites of passage, yeah, it feels like it's definitely the long game, setting up rites of passage, and I feel like in many ways we're right at the beginning, and so it's been very slow, kind of baby steps. Yeah, just making sure that we kind of tread carefully with each step that we take, which, to me is a reflection of how we should tread in life. Yeah, this rites of passage, we've got a group of women that went through our adult women rites of passage last year, and they're coming along to learn more about the teens rites of passage. And so in a sense we've got a whole lot of new people, and then we've got a whole lot of our older crew. So it's a really big mob of facilitators, helpers. So I'm listening a lot to how we stay unified and how we keep clarity so that there's not confusion. Yeah, I guess that's probably one of the things that feels important to me as we journey into these things, is maintaining good clarity, because I feel like it's really easy to fall into confusion, and it's really easy to fall into kind of chaos. And, there's enough of that sort of can happen on its own as part of what is the nature of a rite of passage without kind of contributing to it, if you like. And as you would know, it's kind of like walking towards a pressure cooker, really. There's definitely an intensity to the lead-in, and we're definitely right in that right now, like after running our transition night. And yeah, so I'm just always kind of listening. Yeah, like that things are going as smoothly as they can, really, and that we're on track. Yeah, that's probably what happens for me, I guess. Yeah.
Is there anything more you want to share about your role? Because if, knowing you, I can't imagine that you're going to be out there putting out small fires, micromanaging people, get involved in the kitchen, all that sort of stuff. In the context of, in April, I'm definitely in much more of a leadership role than I've ever been. And yeah, that's certainly a shift in roles and responsibilities. Yeah, it's the word overview's been used before in the men's rites of passage and the teenage rites of passage. I guess in the context of that overview, yeah, what sort of space are you in?
Yeah, it's definitely, it is my natural inclination that I'm a big picture person. So I'm looking at the big picture of all that's moving. But I'm also, as one of my managers said to me a long time ago, she said, you have the unique ability to see the big picture, and then helicopter down and like tend to something and then come back up and kind of like have a look. So I guess that's probably describes a lot of what I do. So yeah, I'm really interested in what is that big picture and what's this whole container look like, and what I'm monitoring is connection. So I'm looking for the ways that we're working in connection. And, in some ways, like another expression of that might be just presence. Like, are we really here, or are we thinking about this too much, or planning too much, or, just not paying attention with our hearts? So, yeah, and I guess that's probably what I do to guide a program as well. Absolutely, I am so fully grateful that we have a team of people that create this event. And I definitely kind of come from that place where I feel like, yeah, we all have different skills in how we contribute to that. And I'm so grateful for all the different skills that people bring. And I feel like the place that I'm probably coming from is, yeah, like having that big picture view. And, as you would know, like ceremony is this process. Classically in rites of passage, we kind of know it as separation. Then you go through the challenge. Then you come out to the return. And in a way, yeah, like it's kind of a descent and an ascent. And I'm really kind of tuned into monitoring the quality of that. Yeah, so I'm really
Mm.
interested in what that looks like, and, if necessary, yeah, and I guess this probably comes from a lot of my training, to run quests and things as well, is like, what are the moments and what are the little things that you can do to just create a little bit more tension if that's what's needed, or, let a bit off, or, where are the moments where we need to kind of hold silence, and so how do we actually like massage that space to create the atmosphere that we want? So that's usually kind of like the thing that I've got a fairly strong track on. And then, yeah, if there's bits that need tweaking, then, sometimes I helicopter in and speak to those bits, or, to a person, or change the program a bit. Yeah, I feel like so Rosie and I kind of do that a little bit together. Like that's the role that we play amongst the many roles that are there. I can't say it enough. They're all valuable and they're all needed. They just kind of carry different qualities. But yeah, Rosie and I kind of have a unique way that we work where, we can come down to that earthly plane and do the work that's needed. And one person listens, and then the next person comes down and does the bit, and the other person goes to listen. And so we kind of alternate, because it's very hard to kind of be doing something and listening, really deeply, kind of in a spiritual kind of way. So, yeah, that's a dance that works quite well.
Yeah, what a beautiful, rich explanation of that space. Oh, yeah, I've really appreciated how you've circled back and gathered more information as it arose, left nothing behind. Is there anything more you think or feel or want to say while we're here?
Mm. I was having a conversation with someone today, and maybe you and I have even spoken to this, that, yeah, it's not, we don't live in a place or a culture or a time where it's always easy to recruit people into rites of passage, because it's such an unfamiliar, unknown thing. And, with that comes a whole lot of labeling, like maybe it's woo woo or a cult, or, too hippie, or too privileged, or I don't know, whatever.
Mm.
People like to stick a label and a judgment on something they don't know about. Yeah. And there's sometimes the question of like, well, is this the thing that's really needed in the culture right now? And I guess, yeah, perhaps the final thing that I want to say is like, I can't think of anything that we need more in our culture right now than to be acknowledging rites of passage for teenagers in our world, because in these times of great uncertainty and change, and where all those kind of external structures that we might ordinarily seek our validation from are kind of crumbling and not making sense. At its heart, like really, we are the only ones who can validate ourselves, and we're the only ones that can trust in ourselves and trust in our own knowing and trust in our own connection to life. And you've got to start to learn that somewhere. I mean, and hopefully maybe you get that through childhood, but at that critical moment of a rite of passage, to know that you've got a community that recognizes you, that sees you for the truth of who you are, and that you see those people down the street, you see them in the cafe or whatever. Like, I just can't think of anything more valuable, really. So during times like this where I'm just flat out and I feel like my brain's frying and I just think, what the hell am I doing? You know, I just remember that. And yeah, that, like, what else would I want to do with my energy than commit that to the future generations? You know, yeah, I can't think of anything else really that I want to commit my time and energy to that doesn't revolve something around that idea and that topic. And that's what I do. Commit my life and my time to is that, like, people knowing themselves and trusting themselves and living their truth, you know, and you know, for young people, like, you know, every generation is evolving from the generations before them, and you know, I really love this expression that, you know, and each younger generation is an answer to the prayers of the generations that came before them. And so they're bringing something, they're bringing a gift, and they're bringing something that's not here. So we have to get them to trust in the truth of who they are, because we don't know what that is that they're bringing, but we want to support them to bring that out. And together we make that great discovery, you know, like for the future. I think that's awesome. So yeah, that's where I want to put my time in.
That's beautiful, Mog.
Let's go do it then, Demo. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Well, enjoy the journey.
Thank you.